Did you know I've got a song called Peanut where I just put on voices for 3 minutes? It's a very famous song. It's had hundreds of views.
My daughter does voices and I don't know where they come from. So, like, she goes, "Hello, me tatty mate." Something like that. And then she spent ages practicing, like, "Mummy, how are you?" You know, I don't, you know, just like this.
All right, well, let's do it. Hello, me tatty mates, and welcome to Michael and Ivanka's grand podcast. Welcome. How do you do it?
Welcome. You have to breathe in and talk.
Welcome to the episode. It's a podcast where we talk about some ideas we should probably have learnt a bit more about up front, but, you know, part of it is just putting ideas on the map and then hopefully learning more about them as we or you go. You can tell us. My name's Michael Forrest.
And I'm Ivanka Magic.
This week, we're going to have a crack at something. We're going to talk about disaster capitalism, which is a term I learned yesterday. So I watched a couple of videos, had a bit of a listen, had a brief read. I think I get the gist of it, but I'm going to be hoping Ivanka's got some stuff to say about it. I think we're going to think through some thoughts. What were we thinking about in terms of disaster capitalism?
Well, even though I've heard of the term more than Michael has, I have done less research than Michael.
Okay.
I keep encountering the term in various articles, and I've made assumptions about what it means. Which may or may not be true. So I thought, rather than you know, just go and learn boringly on my own, I thought I'd learn with Michael and with anyone else who cares to listen to this podcast.
So, content warning: we may end up on
Might be
Wikipedia
weak.
this week. We may end up reading from Wikipedia. I don't know. I hope not, because that to me is, come on, if you're just doing that, you don't deserve to have a podcast. How's it going? What are you thinking?
I'm good. I hadn't decided which story I was going to tell you. I know something really bad happened to us this week. Well, it was good and bad, but bad. The man came to read the water meter. And at about 8:30 in the morning, 8:15, comes down and he goes, hello. I was like, hello. He said, madam, there is something very wrong. Your water consumption is enormous. He said, usually you don't usually use a lot of water and it's gone mental. So to give you scale, I think we usually use about 20 cubic metres of water a month, but the reading was for 518 cubic metres a month.
WTF.
So this is going to cost us about €1,000 in wasted water. But my first task was to find out where the leak was. So we had to switch, because we've had because it's a brand new water meter. Well, the water meter is 2 years old, and since we've had it, there are 659 cubic meters used, and in the last month, there's been 518 of them. So anyway, We've changed all the pipes in this house except the one leading to the outdoor shower. And so we've had to dig up our terrace and our outdoor shower, because that's where the leak was. But I switched off the water to the house, phoned the water board, got somebody, and then got our favourite local odd job man to come round, who luckily works for the water board, and he capped it off. So at least we're not hemorrhaging more water. But for a family who try very hard to live in a not over-consuming sort of way, she's blown all my water consumption gold stars way out of the water.
Sounds like you need to delete some done good points, doesn't it?
Yeah, I need to probably go back a few years. I've done good points.
Oh no.
So yeah, that's clean tap water. And do you know what the worst thing about this? So there's no visible signs, or anywhere, and it's not even like the plants in my garden have benefited because the water has literally gone down.
I was going to ask, is there some luscious greenery growing at least?
There is, well, one of the loquats, the one that gives us shade on the terrace, is enormous.
Okay.
But it's always been, it's been in. So they're also looking at where this leak is and the state of the tap. I think it's been gently seeping water probably for a very long time. It's only in the last 2 or 3 weeks it's just gushing.
Oh my God. I have some similar bad news in that our rosemary plants seem to be dying already.
Oh no.
If only we had a leaky pipe, they might have survived.
My positive note about this whole experience was that the man who read the water meter could have simply gone back to the office, recorded the reading, and we'd have got a massive bill.
Yeah.
No, he actually came down and was like, no, you need to sort out. You've got a leak. This is going to cost you a fortune.
Yeah. Well.
So he's getting a chocolate bar or something next time I see him. Bottle of whiskey. I don't know, anything.
It's a scam. It's just he does the pipes. He just wants free chocolate. Don't get sucked in.
So yeah, that happened. So yeah, there you go. Hashtag island life. How are you, Michael?
Hello. All right, I've always got a list of things. So I'm going to quick fire them. Right, we watched Killing Eve, which I was like, who did this? Phoebe Waller-Price. Let's watch Fleabag as well, because I sort of hadn't really I'd watched it, but that was sort of pre-Guilty Feminist, and I think I kind of reacted a bit badly to the woman stuff. I was like, I don't relate to this, but yeah. Quite enjoyed the first series, but really enjoyed the second series of that, and just realised that she's got. And we also coincidentally decided to try watching The British Crashing, and it was like, oh, that's her as well. Like, she's been growing this empire. Apparently, she lives quite nearby as well in Kensal Rise. But Killing Eve first series I thought was great, although I sort of had to give it the bent. I was like, I think it knows what it's doing, and then it sort of seemed to pay off. But the second series we haven't got through. It's like nothing makes sense anymore. And I think Phoebe's, I can't tell if she's as connected to it, but I was sort of pleasantly surprised, but also a bit annoyed about the way it seems to all be framed for like a 4:3 aspect ratio. So it's filmed in widescreen, but all the stuff seems to sort of happen in that safe zone. It's like, it's 2019. Like, if someone's got a TV, they can just have some bars. They'll be fine. They're not interested in... But the fact that the BBC is still kind of like doing that, I find a bit silly. But
I think you and I, part of the reason that our telly watching doesn't overlap a great deal is that we watch telly very differently. I've not even clocked in any way what aspect ratio Killing Eve is recorded in. What about the story? I thought the story was good.
I thought the story was good. I thought it was a little under... I thought the motivation was a little unclear at times. Like, I thought they kind of overblew some stuff, especially, and then the second series really just, it seemed like they lost why anyone was doing anything. I'm like, why is anyone behaving in any way anymore? They're not acting like humans. They're just acting like caricatures of their first series arcs. But anyway, so watched Killing Eve. But yeah, did enjoy the first series, that's for sure.
I haven't finished the second series.
No, well, there you go.
But that's because I can't remember the last time I watched something on telly.
We do have
between my shoulder exercises and my meditation and my gardening and my podcast recording and my working and my child and my dog and my swimming. I've got no time. No time.
Oh, I'm too busy. It's so important.
I'm far too busy for things that aren't filmed in the correct aspect ratio for 2019.
We'll make the most of it while we can. A couple of other thoughts. I see Cummings is behind the throne now. He's got it. He's got the throne. No. He's our little. He's our, what do you call him?
Bannon.
Whatever it is. He's taken the throne. Which, as
he's the puppet master.
I don't know if I feel better or worse about the fact that the guy who actually had a reason for wanting Brexit is now sort of like controlling it, and maybe there will be a benefit after all. But also we've talked about, go and listen back to our episode about that guy to see what we thought. Well, Ivanka certainly objected quite hard to the I know better attitude.
Yeah.
And because of the backlog, I feel like I'm a bit late to talking about this, but I think we should have a bit of a weekly Cummings watch on the podcast.
Oh, yes.
I think we should be keeping an eye on him. The other thing I was just thinking, do you know, and actually I kind of wanted to ask you about was, it occurred to me the other day that I might want to study law, like in earnest somehow. I'm not doing it if it's 200 grand. I'm not going to do it if it's 200 grand of student debt, but I was going to ask you, like, was your sister, what did that involve? Was it expensive for her to do that, or was there some sort of way of doing it, or is there a particular thing she's doing? Do you know?
There's two different ways of doing it. If you're doing like a law conversion degree.
What does that mean?
Well, that's like not studying law from scratch, but rather getting some credit for the fact that you already have a degree and then going to study law.
Right.
Okay. So it makes for a very full-on 1-year course. Very full-on. And then, but obviously she managed to do it and foster and all sorts of other things, so it's not impossible to fit around things.
It's funny
but she's obviously very, very clever.
It's funny that because it's obviously the mindset, the scholarly mindset. Well, you have proved that you're a Bachelor of Science already, and we can convert that. You've already proved your basic worth in the hierarchy, and we can convert your thing. Whereas I'm just like, I kind of want to learn that talking thing. Like how to get things done by
the
talking.
Arguing thing.
The arguing, being able, and also I think I think I could probably do a lot if I understood how the legal system worked with my technological background. I think there would be a lot of opportunities to improve things there. So I was thinking like maybe I should think about it seriously. Don't know.
I
would like to keep you satisfied. Celebrate the magic of our time. Why go round in circles when you could be fine? Some things happening aside. Make you stop and think about your life. You couldn't see the pattern there for all the lines. Okay, let's talk about
disaster capitalism.
Yes, let's talk about disaster capitalism. Starting from I suppose, definition or an example, perhaps. Because the ones I heard today were, apparently Chile is the first. Like, there's a YouTube video I'll link to so that you can see what my sources are. But apparently Chile did a whole thing, like some sort of military thing happened, but the next one we know about is sort of Reagan and Thatcher, and how Thatcher got a lot of stuff on the back of the Falklands thing, and then there was a lot of stuff about 9/11 as well, and how just I don't know. You talk.
So my context for encountering the term disaster capitalism comes always under the banner of Brexit, of people like Trump being elected, people like Bolsonaro in Brazil. Somehow this term disaster capitalism gets woven into any various articles that cover them. And my impression of it is like the examples you brought up of Reagan and Chile and stuff. It's like if you I think this is if you have to spend money in your army or in security or in something, you are creating jobs. This is what I think a lot of the theory behind things like the Green New Deal are, and this is what the Labour Party did for the they did the opposite of disaster capitalism in a way, when they founded the NHS after the Second World War.
Right.
The founding of the NHS didn't just help people be healthier, but it created a whole industry around itself of employment, of supply, of all sorts of things. Because if it created an accessible marketplace for the entire nation, and therefore there were people could. So that's sort of creating the NHS is the opposite of disaster capitalism. But I think there's something
Although both
about
precipitated in the wake of a disaster, and ironic that like conservatives would be so anti. Doesn't that seem like government jobs created by the government seems like an anti-conservative thing, and yet that's how they're making loads and loads of money now. The government is making all these jobs in. But
it's not an anti-neoliberal.
Right.
Neoliberalism does not believe in the public sector, and a lot of the things that Kate Raworth talks about in Donut Economics is this. The whole neoliberal approach is based around the idea that the common is always wrong. So nothing that's publicly managed or publicly run or funded can possibly be its most efficient, whatever the hell that means. Yeah. So, but where I struggle. So that's my. I've made assumptions about it.
Don't take our word for any of this, listener.
Yeah, but go and check. Please do check our homework and email in with corrections.
We hope that you will get interested, and I'm certainly I'm going to be thinking about this more.
Yeah. So, and this what made me start thinking about it this week is, it is very hard to ignore the news that the planet has been experiencing a lot more fire this summer season than it would normally. The Arctic Circle has been on fire, and now the Amazon is on fire. And so we have, this is not good. Unless, I think, you somehow can park the concept of climate change in your head and the catastrophe of climate change, and then just focus on the monetizing opportunities attached to the disaster. And I don't understand that. I cannot process that. I don't know where to go with that when people talk about sort of like because I put this thing on my Facebook sort of about the I just put that in geography years ago I learned that the Amazon rainforest was the lungs of the planet, and it seems we've got lung cancer. And then immediately somebody who used to work with at Ubuntu went, actually, that is not true, and gave me an explanation about why the Amazon is not the lungs of the planet. So I said, So, which first of all I got very angry at, belly angry, nearly did a flippant, nasty response, then remembered that everyone's just doing the best that they can. And then so sort of the most controlled response I could come up with was like, so Amazon on fire good or Amazon on fire bad? And he went, no, bad, but it's got stomach cancer instead of lung cancer. I was like, thanks for that clarification.
I once got very, very stoned and sat in the garden and looked at the trees and thought, wow, they look like lungs sticking out of the earth. Whoa, the trees are the lungs of the planet. I could see it and I felt connected to everything. Also, I found that I could respond to a bird and it would respond back with a slightly longer phrase, and I could keep that going with longer and longer phrases. Good times. Proceed.
That's a good story. We had a bird in our bird bath yesterday. It was very exciting.
It doesn't sound it.
It was very cute.
Okay.
So yes, so all these kind of like the sort of disaster capitalist mentality. We all look at, when I say we, me and everyone I know who wants to be able to breathe and drink clean water and whatever, grow food, look at all these things as disasters, and then you've got disaster capitalists, this is in my head how it's filed, who look at it as an opportunity to make some money.
Right.
And I don't know how that concept is allowed to exist. How are you allowed to view the suffering of an entire planet's worth of people as an
opportunity
for yourself to make some money? How is that legal? How is that not
the definition of evil?
Yeah, how is this okay? How can we even be casually using this phrase in a newspaper article? How is that? So that's why I brought it up. It's probably just yet another lens with which we can continue our 2-year conversation about inequality.
It's the sort of crux of it to me, from what I saw, seemed to be the way that to create change, an opportunity for change, like disasters are an opportunity for change, and. And we know that different types of people may be in a position to make those changes in response to a disaster. It's weird thinking about Brexit. Like, Brexit's not it's not a disaster in the same way as, the Reichstag fire was, for example. That's what we watched at the weekend. We watched Michael Moore's film Fahrenheit 11/9 on Netflix. Oh. Have you seen that?
No.
About Trump. Basically about how Trump started this whole presidential thing because Gwen Stefani was getting paid more than him, and he wanted to prove that he was more popular. That's how it started.
Really?
It's literally how it started. And then he got a taste for it. It was like, wow, we've got a crowd. And all that whole Mexicans are racists bit was almost like, it was part of him. He was almost doing it was almost like a joke. Like that whole podium thing he was just like, making stuff up and trying to look as though he wanted to be elected, and just to try and prove something to some TV network, and it just escalated from there. So Michael Moore draws a lot of comparisons with the state of what Germany in the 30s had the biggest film, had made the best films in the world. They were a lot of affluent people. It was a really good, it was a lot of parallels between America's status today, and then just talking about how Hitler got in, and the Reichstag fire was this precipitating event that they declared a national emergency that then let them take power in a more serious way. So I mean, if that's the Nazis did a bit of disaster capitalism to get into power, and now just the fact that Trump is casually just living in a permanent state of emergency powers now.
But that's what Boris is going for.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, that's where Brexit is a disaster, is that they are invoking disaster tactics to try and take over Parliament, basically. His little gang.
Well,
of friends.
I mean, I think I
well,
see
Dominic is.
I think Dominic more than Johnson's. It's depressing that grown-ups would vote him into a position of power. That's pretty depressing. But let's face it, Cummings he's manoeuvred himself into position in a completely undemocratic way, and he's not going to have a crown on his head, but he's going to certainly be driving things, because Boris hasn't got an idea in his head. He's just really? As long as Cummings can couch it in terms of this will make you look like a leader, this will make you famous, then he's going to be able to get anything through this guy.
I did see a picture of Cummings the other day. Looked very thin. Okay. Hopefully he's not very well.
Well, if he's like a Bannon, I think it's looking horribly unhealthy seems to be part of the profile, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think with some of these behaviours of humans, I sort of think if I didn't love so many people, I think I would suggest that we didn't deserve to make it. Do you know what I mean? We do some fucking stupid things on the whole, and it's like that Trump competing with
never before has ignorance been given so much freedom to like gone so unquestioned. And it's like, at least people used to feel bad about not knowing anything.
Yeah. Be embarrassed. Well, yeah. I mean, I saw that article. There was. I'm sure I showed it you on the news. The head of news for Channel 4 talking about the fact that coming into these difficult times, journalists have a duty to question politicians more and to call them out when they're lying. And then Radio 4 or BBC 4, whatever, one of them put out a thing to go, should politicians always be challenged when they lie in an interview? I was like, my reply was just yes. I was like, I mean, can you imagine, like, if in what walk of life can you walk around lying?
Yeah.
And get away with it and not be challenged? Imagine at work. Did you do that work? Yes.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. And I did a wonderful job in it. And no one's better at doing this sort of thing than I am. Okay, then.
Yeah, here's the pay rise. Yeah. It's like, just like, I don't, it was like, how is that even allowed to be a question? By the fact that you're even putting it out there as a question implies that there is a possibility where the answer could be, no, they shouldn't. It's like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, like, exactly. And like Radio 4 lost any respect from me a long time ago. Like, I think they've been part of this. And they're the most authoritative sounding news source. Right?
They are.
They're the most British BBC sounding thing, and they are they're utterly riding roughshod over journalistic integrity and accountability, in my opinion. Like, they do not care one bit. They just want to kind of like have these tiny little segments of what seems to be a conversation but is actually some sort of rushed, shallow buzzword yelling thing that then gets skipped for the news or the next segment, or a little bit of like emotion porn, like like a story about like something terrible happening somewhere. Here's something for you to cry about. Like, and now sports. So the disasters. It's funny, like, how you define these disasters, because we can talk about the disaster side of it, because Brexit's a weird kind of disaster, like, because it's like a democratic disaster, isn't it, rather than something got blown up disaster. No, so here's how I like how the 9/11 was used, according to what I saw today, is that basically this war on terror was created as this. It's basically a never-ending project.
It's a never-ending industry.
A never-ending industry that is employing hundreds and thousands of people, paying them a lot of money. And then there was this bit, like to start off with, like these contractors that go over, like consultants that are going over to sort of Afghanistan and places, Iraq and places like that, and now like outnumber the soldiers. So these sort of highly paid democracy consultants now sort of like outnumber even the troops, just because it's all about like how can we keep making money out of this. The other aspect of all this was how it like relied on this shock treatment idea, where if you put someone into a state of shock, then they become a lot more suggestible and a lot easier to they become sort of more childlike somehow. And so they were doing sort of electric shock therapy, and then talking about the CIA's like torture tactics, and how if you can just kind of shock people into a state of that sort of childlike vulnerability, then you can sort of get them to do things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to get. And then that's exactly what was still being used in Guantanamo and places like that by the US until, I don't know, probably still now, I don't know. And then, so you put the nation, while the nation is in a state of shock over something like 9/11, it's like, okay, let's take away some of your basic freedoms and make some money. And like...
But that's the same in the UK. There's the right to detain indefinitely somebody who's suspected of terrorism. Yeah. And it's just, but that affects all of us. Yes. It's like, to say, but it all goes back, it all goes back to this creating people to hate. And then therefore, when you're watching the news, instead of going, oh my God, look, this industry is being created to kill people, for no reason, you go, oh, well, thank goodness they're defending us from the evil Islams, or in the current incarnation of us versus them. And it's like, it's just a bit tiring, to be honest with you.
Well,
because it's just like, it's why can't like the Green New Deal? I know I don't know enough about the minutiae of the Green New Deal to be able to critique it in any way.
Yeah.
However, I still think an equivalent, to the disaster economy that's trying to set out to make everything better by using the same industry creation tactics, but not around disaster, but rather around progress and survival.
Yeah.
I don't see how that's a bad thing. It's like, why is, because in that Donut Economics, Kate Raworth talks about the US coming out of the Depression by the government spending loads on putting in transport infrastructure, like building the railway. So that creates jobs, it creates blah, 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 blah. So that's what this is. Let's create jobs around people installing insulation on everyone's house.
Yeah, like you're doing it anyway. Like these governments, they're doing it anyway. They're doing a massive scale job creation, like government job creation. You're doing it anyway. Why not do it for something good? And I have an answer for that couched in terms of, I don't know if you saw, probably didn't, but Stephen Fry's Pindex, the latest video on that was, are conservative brains different to liberal, to the other types of brains? I don't want to say liberal anymore. What's the word I want? But and basically it's you act out of fear versus acting out of like a creative optimism, looking to make things better. The conservative governments are very happy to justify a war on terror, employing thousands of people and doing massive government spending on something out of fear that they would not even conceive of doing out of doing something good. And it comes back to that, you're happy to spend all this money on war, but not education. Why isn't education an aircraft carrier, with the most expensive high-tech hardware in the world? Why is war that thing? And that's a fundamental difference between fear and, and you see countries that take the opposite tack doing a lot better. Citation needed.
Well, just for a little bit of an editorial correction, we referenced the research on conservative versus liberal brains in this very podcast some time ago.
So
we didn't need Stephen Fry to tell us. But there's that sort of fear versus.
That was my answer to your question that you were answering. It's why can't they? It's because they're afraid rather than looking for a positive solution.
Rather than creative, Because I was having this casual conversation with another parent as our children bounced up and down on a trampoline, and he's a Croat, she's half Croat, half American, and they're currently living in Barcelona. And they're like, "Oh, why are you here?" I said, "Well, I've sort of basically decided that my child will not be starting school in England in September. She'll just be 4.5, blah blah blah." And he was like, "Yeah, I don't know why they insist on people starting so early, because it's not like the British education system scores on any measures worldwide. Our education system is rubbish. Absolutely rubbish. Why can't we invest energy in having an education system we can be proud of? Why can't being British mean really well educated? Why can't it mean why is that? And I think, and it's like when you talk about with the headmistress of the nursery here, she's just finishing a master's in early childhood education, and I've been talking to her bits and pieces, and she's like, there's no child development theories that suggest that going to school when you're 4.5, even if it is reception class, blah blah blah, is a good idea. And it's like, why? She was like, well, but Britain, but why? And I was like, because factories. I was like, because history and because politics. That's why. And it's like, why would you this world where you're not, or running a country where you're not trying to do the very best? Okay, we know why, but I don't know what we're going to do about it.
That's fair, but I also don't find it hard to. I hate to think that someone could be this so stupid or obvious. What's that thing where someone just takes a really obvious belief that it's quite... So what I want to say is, like, the idea that if you keep the populace uneducated, then it will be easier to control them. But I could see your Rees-Moggs and your Boris Johnsons believing that. I could see them just think... And it's like a really superficial intellectual idea, right? Like superficial intellectualism of, oh yeah, well, like that short-termist is the same thing as, oh, well, yeah, I won't do a refund for a faulty product because I'll make more money that way. It's that kind of thinking, right? It's exactly, it just seems so short-sighted, so ignorant, so sort of falsely, because there's so many reasons that it's a bad idea for people to be undereducated. But I can see those people, those elites, educated people, I can see those people with those big ideas about their own intelligence going for that and believing it and acting on it and just thinking that that's fine. That's a fine way to see things. But
yeah, I think they have I think in that world, though, it goes back to early childhood psychology. We're talking about, we've talked about this before, like all these people that, don't get enough love. It's like they're taken away and reared without being sufficiently cuddled and loved and being given enough affection. And that those articles circulating is you should have a psychological evaluation before you're allowed to be a politician. But it's like, how could, I'm not saying that everybody who goes through that system turns out that way, but if you have any sensitivities, it would have a disastrous effect on you psychologically, being handed off to somebody else in the middle of the night, or being left to cry because the baby is just toying with you. Yeah, so so you think, like, so there's just a meanness and a bitterness and a... I think so. Like, I think on top of it all, and there's an emotional reason for these things usually. But just you sort of have to believe in the artifice to sort of stay sane. Like, you have to believe that you're better than everyone else, and that those people are just worse than you, and no amount of education could improve them. Like that, I think that's how these people think, and it's the conservative value that there is a hierarchy of quality of person that is true, and that education, opportunity has nothing to do with it. Which I think that's pretty easy to demonstrate isn't true. But I think that's what then is needed to help them stay.
It's the shell.
It's been bred in. It's a shell.
It's the kind of like armour that they wear. That if that was gone, if they were just exposed and vulnerable, then like any of us, they don't want that. We've all. No. It takes a lot to not have to hide behind a wall like that. I don't know how just looking at how much they employ to keep that the way it is. Like, going back to that thing, like pulling off the Cambridge Analytica approach, that cost money. Yeah. Cost a lot of money and a lot of people working. Now, I know you've brought up maybe they only needed to be 2% better and that was enough. And maybe they could have been 20% better, but they tried to keep it within reason. I don't know. But let's imagine that actually achieving the 2% was quite hard. Yeah. Like, why is there something about the progressive focused brain, the sort of more open brain, the less fear-filled brain, that means that then we don't go to battle with these people enough? Do you know what, well, because we're not attuned to looking for threats. Our brains are less attuned to, there's a threat coming from there, and more, there's an opportunity, there's an idea, there's something I'm interested in over here. Like, I don't know what the opposite of the threat thing is supposed to be, but like that's, if you're just looking for threats, and threats must be shut down and controlled so that we can all be happy, and we're not on the other side of the fence, you're not really looking for those, because you kind of know that you hope that things will work out.
I went to work at the Labour Party, and it was part of a digital transformation type project.
Yeah.
And it was at a time, frankly, I was a bit too late to maybe have taken Cummings on head to head.
Yeah.
Because I was there maybe only a couple of months before maybe a bit earlier than that. But I wasn't on my own, and I'm not attributing too much ability to myself. But like we encountered barriers to being able to implement things that if we hadn't, perhaps that like imagine what we could have done, because there was a team of digital Cummingses, like in the Labour Party who had funding, but we met with so much petty resistance that there was no way that we could actually achieve anything. And I wonder, I've certainly when it was announced that he was going to be helping Boris, one of the women I work with there, she said she was like, have you seen this? Isn't it? Imagine what we could have done.
Yeah. What were the barriers? Because what it sounded like was that what Cummings was doing was like they were like feeding the politicians enough to keep them able to go off and do whatever fuckery that they wanted to do, but the real work was being done a little bit under the radar. And I don't think they were sort of asking for permission, were they? No,
I think that's the thing. I think, well, you will know that I'm not an asking for permission type person, but I think there's something in that sort of more liberal nature that you don't like to be devious. I'm not a devious person.
Yeah.
And a lot of the resistances that I was encountering were like, I would never have, on the subject of playing chess, I would not have been able to play chess against these people because I would not have been able to anticipate their moves.
Yeah.
It's like, what? And I don't understand the motivation. My sister has a theory that there are like people in the Labour Party that are in the Labour Party because that's what families have voted for traditionally. But if they took the time to evaluate their own values, they would realise that they were conservatives and that they should go and be in the Conservative Party and let the people who truly have that sort of socialist values be in and run the Labour Party. And she's like, the rest of you just fuck off out of my party.
So it wasn't even like the rules, it was just the people.
It was the people.
Right.
It was a devious set of behaviours that just... they would cite the rules, but it wasn't like literally phoning a supplier behind my back and telling the supplier not to talk to me.
Wow.
Do you know what I mean? Like I've never like...
So ironically, it was the people who had a fear mentality that undermined your ability to actually kind of flex that optimism, socialism muscle.
Yeah. Because if you think about what if the Labour Party, a socialist party, should all be about openness and inclusion.
Yeah.
And digital is an amazing enabler of that.
Yeah.
And it's like nothing we were suggesting was more than just getting, because the Labour Party has, certainly last time I knew, which was a couple of years ago, over 500,000 members. Most of those people aren't active. They're just paying their subs.
Yeah.
Now, if you only activated another percent, that is a huge workforce to help make change. And it was like our whole theory was around activation, and getting more people involved in a way that they could be, that suited them. Because the Labour Party involves a lot of going to meetings that are a bit bizarre and handing out flyers. So we were looking at how do we get all these other people more engaged and doing more, because you might have a conservative donor who gives you a load of money, but actually 500,000 active members is a huge force to be reckoned with. To bring it back to, the mechanism of disaster capitalism, it's, I guess the reason that it
Because what we're talking about here is how to make change, how to move things forwards. And there's always resistance. There's always fear around change. Like there's always going to be someone.
Yeah.
And also the more people you've got involved, the more chance there is that someone's going to like come up with a fear. And then fears just, they naturally spread throughout groups, right? Like a fear will generally, you spread fear, you sow fear. And it's just very hard to achieve any change in a sort of peacetime environment, because the fears seem to be more scary than the potential benefits. So what disaster capitalism is, it takes something that has exceeded any fear, right? An event has now exceeded any fears you might have. And so then they have an opportunity to just make change. And it's really a measure of the person what kind of change they make at that point. George W. Bush, didn't have to go down the militaristic route, right?
No.
There was nothing predetermined that meant that he had to create this engine of war industry, like that would go on for the rest of time, because until all evil has been hunted down and destroyed in the entire world with guns, like that's the mission statement of that. Just that's the decision that was made. That it didn't have to be that, but you've brought up the NHS, like it's troubling that change seems to be precipitated on something that exceeds people's fears happening. Yeah. But like anything, like the measure of the person is what they do under pressure, like what they do in an emergency, what they do when something bad happens. It's easy to be like love and hope and peace and flowers to everyone in peacetime. But it's when you're under attack. It really takes some character to maintain composure in that situation and not just knee-jerk reaction, which is what the US did, which is, I don't know what we're doing in this country, but there's a lot of people that seem to be knee-jerking, but like it's activated us. It's like that disaster had to happen for us to start, certainly for me to start become activated in this world and talk about politics and talk about, think about these things, because suddenly it was very clear that it wasn't going to just happen on its own.
Well, if you're talking about the measure of a person, do you know the New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern? Mm-hmm. She, after that mosque shooting, she refused to use the name of the person that perpetrated the shooting. She came out, I think, incredibly powerful and changed the gun laws very, very quickly, like within 8 days or something. But the fact that she had the wherewithal, the presence of mind, the character to go, this person is not getting a platform. This ideology is not getting a platform. What's getting a platform is how we want to be as a country and how we want to behave towards each other. And there's not enough of that.
And it takes, I don't think it should have to take a magnificent person to be able to do something like that. I heard something about holding to your principles actually is sometimes the weak thing to do, like doing something, making a decision on principle, because this is often the weak choice. But I mean, certainly in that situation, it's like, okay, I have this principle that people are fundamentally good, and that any badness is a temporary aberration and people can change. Like if you hold to that belief, even in the wake of a terrorist attack or that's when you're tested, and that's when you really have to do it. But I think the debate is so much around anyone who's got a belief. The obsession is with just quickly showing that there are some people that don't have the belief. So certainty is an absolute, people just don't have any certainty about what the right thing is to do unless they kind of, buy into these leaders that will sell them certainty, a reductive kind of certainty. Holding to a principle under pressure in the wake of a lot of terrified people takes the sort of person that there aren't many of. No. How could we make more of those people, I guess, was the crux of what I was trying to say there. Is it possible to make more of those people? I think it would be if more people were given a safe existence?
I think if you read about this psychology of early childhood, like these first 2 years, a lot of human resilience, because there's nothing that can protect you from disaster and trauma in your life. But what a couple of years of being picked up when you cry can do, and in this book it argues about, and maybe I'm just being a bit of having a hippie mum mode, but it's like in this the first couple of years, the amount of resilience that's sort of built into your psychology. So it's not given that then it will protect you forever, because we're all our own people with our own psychology. and the book argues you don't have to be brilliant, you just have to be a good enough parent. So that doesn't mean being it every time and being right every time, but being there and providing enough safety and cuddles that you're like establishing. Even brings up the examples of a child that's given a sense of self-worth. If somebody attacks them, will defend themselves. Like, hang on a minute, we have to teach our children not to go into. Maybe I've gone the wrong direction. Look,
I think you've got some. And the thing is, we've covered the points before about the sort of individuals' behaviours and how they come from childhood, and this can be changed. I'm living proof that someone can turn from a broken person into someone that does is okay. But I think what I think about when I think about disaster capitalism and what we're talking about today is I think about cabals of people more than individuals. I think about what are these groups of people that have sort of agreed between themselves to not hold themselves to the same moral standards that other people would be held to. Like, who are these? I mean, I'm starting to sound like the lizard people are doing stuff, but they're doing it quite out in the open.
But I think you are onto something. It made me think about it earlier when you talked about the shell and how come these, it is about, in human history, this is actually weirdly, there's more equality. Well, maybe there's not more equality, but there are fewer people living in abject poverty, even though there are still many millions. So we know this statistically to be true. Life is much better for more people than it ever has been. So instead of it being in a world where only a very small percent, so that 1% that hold all the wealth, they are not necessarily anymore the only educated people. They are not the only people. I think the people who have power and want to retain power have spent the last X thousand years of society using the same principles of secrecy and supremacy and pushing people down and people. But now there's more of, we need to find a new way of going, okay, you can think that, but that's not going to work anymore because we are ourselves more educated. Because even though by lots of people's standards, I'm in the elite. I'm a long way from the elite.
You're not.
And it's like
elite. We're not. And it's like, the liberal elite is not an elite by the standards of the Rees-Moggs and the Boris Johnsons and the David Camerons. Like people you got to stop saying that, because it's just not true. You're looking the wrong way. We're not an elite. We just went to university.
But I think that those of us who think differently and don't want to keep the power for ourselves but want the power to be better distributed simply have to actually go out and do it, because maybe there's something
about law, get involved.
I think there's something. Well, that would be Lydia's argument. Lydia just wants to go actually change the law to make things like you can't mistreat a kid in care because it will be a criminal offence, or ecocide being a law. The law is a powerful tool. But I think we just need to, for the last, let's say 10,000 years or 5,000 years of societies existing, the power have always behaved in the same way that all these people, the Cummings and Johnson,
It's a long history
of this is how it works. Yeah. And we need to find a way of going, enough now. There are more of us and we have more power than you think that we do, and there's more and that's why would you invest in education?
Yeah. And it's harder to hide than ever before. Like, just the technological aspect of all of this, like, people, it's harder to hide than ever before. And it would be nice to think that these people will be the last lot of them.
Yeah.
Like, it would be like, there is a vague hope that maybe this will sort of like go the way of the kings.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, we're done now.
Yeah. So yeah, there we go. Right, like we should wrap up. I just got a text from Bruce saying, good episode about the growing up episode. He says, a man's maturity, that is to have rediscovered the seriousness he possessed as a child at play. Friedrich Nietzsche, Beyond Good and Evil. And he also says, paraphrasing Nietzsche, the kind of activities that should be striven for are those which are playful, creative, and end in themselves. There you go. Got some feedback from a listener, a good friend of mine.
Very good. Thank you.
Does it count as a listener if it's someone you've known for decades? Probably not.
I don't know. If it's nothing else but a way of us keeping in touch with our friends, I think it's cool.
Yes. All right, guys, thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening.
If you like the podcast, we've got a website. It's at grandpodcast.com. There's subscribe on there. There's episodes. There's links. All the links. I take great pains to add all the links. So subscribe if you can. That'd be lovely. And then you get the next one. And we get stats as well. And, who doesn't want stats? Where can people
love stats.
Where can people find you, Ivanka?
People can find me at Ivanka on Twitter.
Anywhere else?
No, not really. That's the best place to find me.
Okay, all right. And
in between the weeds.
Okay, in between I've got a website, michaelforestmusic.com. I actually recorded some stuff. I don't know if you heard a couple of weeks ago. I did all the music with little live performances on my little synth rig. I just recorded it all as I was editing the episode. But yesterday I figured out how to get some nice multi-track recordings. So I think some new music, some new little interludes may be in this episode. I found a way of like as Bruce just mentioned, like the play thing was strangely eye-opening for me, like forcing myself to play for half an hour. And this is a diversion. I know it's in the outro, but I did mean to mention it. Like, it was amazing how much I procrastinated about my playtime the first time. I must have found 2 hours worth of stuff to do instead of just not do anything. But what I found really amazing was playing for no other purpose than the play itself made me want to do a better job of playing than I normally would practicing or playing, because I'm usually like in this mindset of I want to develop a skill or try something that's difficult and kind of learn how to do something that's difficult. But when it was just for me in that moment on my own, I was like, well, I just want to enjoy it. So I'm not going to kind of push myself too far. I'm not going to do stuff that I don't quite know how to do yet, and I'm just going to enjoy it. And that was a bit of a revelation, and I've been enjoying it. And as a result of doing that, I'm starting to kind of come up with some very cool sounding musical bits, which I hope to turn into a good recording soon. And then hopefully the michaelforestmusic.com announcement every episode won't seem quite so silly. What else can people do? What can big shots do?
Big shots can give us some money on patreon.com/grandpodcast. Feels a bit weird asking people to patronise us on Patreon, but
if we don't ask, who will?
Yeah, exactly.
We don't ask.
You don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah,
so that's so if you do that would be cool. And also, if you could write us some reviews and ratings, do some stars, do some shares,
share it,
tweet, tell a friend, that kind of thing.
Tell a friend it.
It's nice when our listeners go up. We like that. It makes us feel like Yeah.
I haven't checked for a while, to be honest, but I need to
that's
get
it,
into
really.
my stats. Yeah, that's great.
I'm going to have to go because my child wants me.
Okay, see you next time, everybody. Bye.
Bye, 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 bye.